Thanks to the iHarvest for sponsoring this episode of On the Ledge podcast. Many of us will miss gardening our own fruits and veggies this winter, but you don't have to. The iHarvest is a beautiful indoor garden that allows you to grow 30 fresh fruits and vegetables 30% faster and bigger than traditional gardening, while in the comfort of your own home. It's compact, needing just 2.5 square feet of floor space, so the iHarvest fits in even the smallest apartments and condos, while doubling as a work of art for your living space. This clean hydroponic garden is great for the environment as well, needing 90% less water than traditional gardening and 60% fewer fertilisers than the fruits and veggies you'd otherwise buy at the supermarket. Better yet, you and your family can eat pesticide-free, herbicide-free and GMO-free produce all year long. Add greenery and fresh food to your life this winter by pre-ordering your iHarvest now at indoorgardenworks.com. Hello and welcome to episode 109 of On the Ledge podcast, teaching you how to take care of your houseplants since February 2017. I'm your host Jane Perrone, and this week we are entering the wonderful world of peperomias, and I'm answering a question about a heartleaf fern. As regular listeners will know, On the Ledge podcast does get about a bit, and this weekend I shall be at Lullingstone Castle in Kent. That's the 21st and 22nd of September 2019 for the British Cactus and Succulent Society gathering known as Cactus World Live. I'm going to be doing a live recording at 1:30 on the Saturday and an audience with Jane Perrone, that would be me, at 2 p.m. on Sunday the 22nd, so do come along if you possibly can. There's going to be loads of other talks, demonstrations and the chance to buy lots of lovely cacti and succulents. And in more thrilling On the Ledge news, I recently did an interview for the BBC Radio 4 Extra show Podcast Radio Hour, which is a show about podcasts, surprisingly enough. They're doing a special on planty podcasts, so no wonder they spoke to me. And you can hear it today at 9 p.m. BST on BBC Radio 4 Extra, but also, not surprisingly, as a podcast, and I'll put a link to that in my show notes. I haven't heard it myself yet, and I can't really remember what I said, but I'm sure it was all very, very intelligent and cogent, so do tune in or download the podcast. And welcome if you happen to have listened to the podcast Radio Hour and decided that On the Ledge was for you. Great to have you here. Pull up a chair, enjoy the show. Apologies in advance for the drain on your bank account as you start to acquire new houseplants. Yes, it's a real phenomenon. It does happen. And I suspect after today's show, you will be spending your money on peperomias, because that's what we're focusing on today. This large and wonderful genus of plants, many of which are grown as houseplants. I recently went to visit Sally Williams, who's the national collection holder of Peperomia in the United Kingdom. She was kind enough to show me around her extensive collection, all situated in her beautiful home in the countryside of the Peak District, which is situated roughly between Manchester and Sheffield, if you can picture that on a map. And I had so much fun talking to Sally, and we spent so long discussing these plants that I've actually split the interview into 2 shows. So this week's show is devoted to part 1 of our chat, and next week will be part 2. And if you've not heard of the term National Plant Collection before, let me explain. In the UK, where I'm based, the charity Plant Heritage is trying to make sure that it conserves all the cultivated plants that we grow in the UK, whether that be indoors or outdoors. And the National Collection Scheme allows individual people or organisations to take charge of a particular group of plants and keep information about those plants for now and for the future for our understanding of them. So most of them are based around a particular genus, or so you might have a group of daffodils or a group of oak trees or a group of ferns. And there's a website called nccpg.com where you can go and search for national collections and see what's out there. I'll put a link in my show notes. And Sally, well, she holds the national collection of the genus Peperomia. And here's Sally explaining how she goes about adding to her collection.
In the whole genus, there's in the region of 1,600 species.
Right.
I am not attempting to go for anything like that.
I'm glad.
Because that's species. We haven't even thrown varieties and hybrids and cultivars into that. So I was thinking, here I am in the Peak District. I'm not in a tropical region around the world. I'm not going to go chasing after all the species. Some of them, admittedly, well, quite often with national plant collections, there's sometimes some of them are a bit weedy, and you may not necessarily. There might be only plants a national collection holder would love.
Yes, right.
So if I say that I concentrate on the cultivars, but to do that, you really do get involved with the species as well. So I basically collect any peperomia I can get my hands on, but I don't worry too much if I haven't got every one of the 1,600.
You can't be completist when you've got 1,600 species. That's an awful lot.
And that's not including the cultivars.
Yeah, and then you've got all the cultivars. And it really is a plant that has, because of its delight as a houseplant, there are a lot of cultivars out there, particularly with certain species.
Yeah.
But how do you know what's a peperomia in the first place? Well, as Sally explains, it's all down to flower shape.
All plants are classified by their flowers. So all peperomia have got a bract, a single ovary, which produces a single seed, and 2 stamens.
Okay.
So that means that's a peperomia. And then more recently, they've been able to back that up with DNA and that. With them saying they're so different, they're from tropical regions all around the world, and there's so many different habitats that they've developed adaptations to be able to cope with the different habitats. So that's why. But they are all peperomia. Over time, when they were first found, they were often called different names. So Peperomia now includes what were a lot of different genera, and they've been changed and decided that they are actually Peperomia.
That's amazing. I mean, and I guess it's a testament to the plant that they've adapted to so many different environments.
Yeah, so different.
Yet they're still peperomias, which is one of the things we love about them. Let's go on. I'm excited to see what else you have to show me.
Just let me jump in here and say, do get the show notes for this episode up on your phone or laptop while you're listening, because I'm going to provide lots of links and pictures to the plants we talk about, which will help your enjoyment no end. Right, back to Sally. We're now in her lovely farmhouse kitchen, which boasts, not surprisingly, a beautiful array of peperomias.
These ones are here. Sometimes they're just ones that I really want to keep an eye on because they're very special. So they might be new ones to me or something. So I'm just making sure I've got the environment right. The other thing, it's a south-facing window. I haven't got that many south-facing windows for the real succulent ones. And then also, because in my plant room where I keep most of the collection, they're in there, and they're just basically by species, by cultivar, and it's a room for a plant, but it doesn't look as wonderful as when you mix up the different leaf shapes, sizes, colours, textures, and you can really appreciate the diversity of the genus.
You really can. Looking at these plants, you can really see. I mean, there's obviously some that there's a stray fern in there which we'll just ignore, but that's fine. I mean, you don't have to ban all other plants. There's lots of ones that will be very, very familiar to most listeners here. The lovely watermelon peperomia, of which yours is a beautiful specimen, and of course the raindrop peperomia, polybotria, which is beautiful. But there's some things here that I would not be able to identify as a peperomia. I mean, I wouldn't immediately, this one here, Fraseri, wouldn't immediately strike me as peperomia-ish. Are these all plants that you've managed to obtain easily, or how is getting hold of peperomias in the UK?
I do a lot of research, and I do buy from specialist nurseries. And because specialist nurseries know that I'm interested, sometimes lovely people, they will contact me and say, look, I've got some of these, I haven't got enough to sell, I don't really know what the name is, would you like some? And so I have got some that way, but I have been collecting them for years, and so it's very cyclical about which ones become available. So one year there was lots of this one for sale, which is Peperomia blanda, and I wasn't particularly impressed with it, but now I've grown it and I've seen its lovely, lovely furry stems. It's become one of my favourites, but I haven't seen that for sale for 2-3 years now. So,
interesting. This fashion's changed. Well, tell me how this all began for you. You said you've been growing them for many years. What was it about peperomias that made you go all out for them? And
I'm not really a flowers person. I'm not a big flowers person, which is good with peperomia.
Yes.
So I saw a Peperomia caperata, not the cultivar I've got here, which is Lillian with the cristae inflorescences, which are really it's fasciculated. It was just the straight one with the mouse tail inflorescences, and I think it was a combination of the crinkly leaves, the funny flower spike, and the tongue twister name that I really liked. And that was, I was 12 when I got my first one. And then I went through a patch where, because I was doing a lot with my garden, I really didn't do much with houseplants and also family. But now the boys have grown up. Now for the last few years I've been able to spend a lot more time with the plants. Yeah, and that was interesting because I started collecting peperomia. I had a few peperomia, and I just had no idea about the diversity when I started collecting them. And that, I think, maybe happens for other national plant collection holders, that the more you find out about them, they become absolutely fascinating.
Yes, you get drawn further and further in, don't you, to the obsession.
Yes.
And they're great houseplants on the whole because they are quite easy to grow. But that said, people do slip up. What are your peperomia, for the general species that people are likely to find in their local garden centre? Can you offer us any pearls of wisdom on looking after these plants? Where do people go wrong?
Overwatering, really. But also if the compost that they're grown in is too compacted. They really like an open compost. Their roots really like to have air around them, and so quite often for convenience, nurseries will grow them in pure compost, which quickly gets compacted, and so your peperomia after a few months can just suffocate, really. Also, if that becomes completely dried out, it won't re-wet. So I use a mix of 2 parts peat-free general purpose, 1 part perlite, 1 part orchid bark for the majority of my peperomias.
Well, they're all looking very, very well on it, I have to say. And I'm particularly curious about this little clutch of bell jars in front of us, which have got some things, again, that I wouldn't necessarily have identified. That one, with the tiniest leaves. These sort of trailing or creeping peperomias.
Yeah.
They obviously need high humidity, but can you tell us a bit more about what these are?
So these ones are all dependent on high humidity, as you guessed there, and so they're the one with the tiny leaves. This is E. marginella, and they form creeping mats. They're epiphytic, this group. Some of them are a bit larger. Peperomia serpens. There's some interesting ones in this group. I don't normally have them right here because we wouldn't be able to use the kitchen.
I love the fact you've got them on this Lazy Susan, though. That's
I have them
the best
north-facing window
possible use for a Lazy Susan.
One way around every day, and so they grow upright instead of going towards the light.
I've got a Lazy Susan in the back of my cupboard somewhere. I'm getting it out and putting plants on it when I get home.
Yeah. So these ones here look as if they're virtually the same plant. Difficult to tell between them. And theoretically, you might not be able to tell between them. One is Peperomia bangroana, and the other one is Peperomia rotundifolia. And so one, the bangroana, that grows in Africa, and the other one is an American, so Central South American plant. And the only way you can tell between them is their flower spike. The length of the flower spike and the length of the peduncle supporting the flower spike is different, and the comparisons between the two is different. And so that's why they're given different species.
Okay.
And that highlights one of the problems with identifying them when you've bought them in cultivation. If you don't know which country they've originally come from,
Right.
you can be struggling to find out exactly which species it is, and you're waiting for them to flower. So that it can take a while.
But these, I can imagine, would be lovely as a sort of a little bit of a green...
In a terrarium.
Yeah, in a terrarium as a green layer.
With other things, yeah. But because of a plant collection, I have to keep them
Yes, you've got to keep
isolated.
yours isolated, but I can see how they'd work really well for that. I have to say, I now know why I killed my Peperomia Bangaruana, because I didn't realise it needed that much humidity. So that's why I destroyed that. But I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Again, knowing where the plant is from is so useful in identifying what you need to do and how you need to look after it.
Well, this one comes from Sierra Leone, and it was found near the river Bagru in Sierra Leone. But whoever wrote down the name wrote down Bagru. So, because that was the name it was first described as, that's how it's got to stay.
It's got to stay like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess this is what happens. Human error creeps in, and then we get these unusual names.
Yes.
Do you? Your knowledge must be growing all the time. Are you still acquiring new plants for your collection?
Oh yes, yeah. It's lovely because nurseries will then highlight a plant, and that might be available for a year or so. Or sometimes a collector will then have produced enough of a difficult to grow plant that they have some to sell. But also researching into them. I spend a lot of time researching them. And that changes things as well. Names change, classifications change. So there's always a lot to be doing with them. There's so many different leads to be looking into.
I'm sure. And do you ever sort of walk into a garden centre, just minding your own business, going in for something completely different, and suddenly come across some cultivar that you've not seen before and get terribly excited?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Usually I know that they're around because I review the breeders. There's a few breeders on the continent who grow Peperomias. So usually I know that they are that they've developed something and that it's going to be available.
Right.
But it's when I can get hold of it. So it does happen, and it's very exciting.
I'm sure I'd be jumping up and down with joy when you find something like that, and trying not to look too overexcited so they charge you double because you're just, I must have this plant. And do they ever turn up in unexpected places? Like, I don't know, I've occasionally been to sort of like a jumble sale, or you're walking past and somebody's having a church plant sale, and you go in and suddenly there's this incredible plant. I don't know if that's ever happened to you, but that's another exciting moment.
Well, because quite often nurseries and will produce a pack of foliage plants, then they can turn up in the oddest places. I've got one plant which I've never seen for sale anywhere else that I got in the local Morrison's, and it must have been foliage plant, and I was walking past and I thought, what? That's a Peperomia Triangularis, and
The trouble is, though, that makes you really not ignore any plant tray that you ever see, because you're always looking for those treasures, aren't you?
Yes,
so, that is a peril. But, it's a treasure hunt, isn't it, partly?
It is.
And I guess that's the delight of concentrating on a single genus, that you can do that.
Yeah.
More Peperomia chat straight after this ad break. Do you need help selecting and sourcing plants for your home? Or perhaps you're seeking someone reliable and knowledgeable to plant sit while you're away? Or maybe you just long for someone really experienced to help you manage your growing collection? This is where horticure.com can help. Horticure offers affordable plant care for people and businesses, matching them with vetted plant specialists who just love to get their hands dirty, repotting, fertilising, watering and nurturing sick plants back to health. Try out Horticure today. Visit horticure.com, that's HORTICURE.com, and use the code LEDGEFAN, that's LEDGEFAN, at checkout to get 30% off your first booking. Horticure, the marketplace for plants and plant care.
With the great burst of excitement about houseplants, have you seen increased in excitement about your own collection? Have you had more people getting in touch, or
possibly? It's difficult to say. I think because of the nature of the genus. They're a very ancient genus. They're very primitive. So anybody who knows about plants has got a bit. They sort of have Peperomia because they're unusual. They're not monocotyledons and they're not eudicots and not true dicotyledons. They're in the magnoliid clade, which is very primitive. And that is possibly one of the reasons for the great diversity, because they've been evolving for so long. So I think there's always been a bit of interest in them. But I think more people are getting interested. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose it's, the sort of the plants that are the sort of the poster plants, the watermelon peperomia, which is all over Instagram, but not everyone grows it as well as yours looks. Are there any particular secrets to making those watermelon peperomias grow well? My problem, I'm just going to try to get you to solve my problems right now, is when I do cuttings, and maybe this will not happen with your technique, which we've already discussed, is distorted leaves on young growth, where the edges of the leaves will be cut, and not through any, I don't think I've done many damage, but they kind of come up kind of distorted. I don't know what...
I've certainly had them coming up crinkly, but then they tend to flatten out.
They flatten out over time. Yeah. I've had one or two where they've actually come out, as I say, with all kind of raggedy edges, and I'm thinking, what have I done? But I wonder whether your actual your technique that I've now started to adopt with the pots whether there's any damage that happens while they're kind of, I don't know how I'm doing it. But anyway, that's interesting to know that that's not a problem that's well known about. It's probably just my strange ways.
Come across it yet.
Okay, well there you go. Well that's good to know.
Yes, yeah. So with the peperomia, we've got these high humidity ones, and over there, these are some of the very low, the high altitude ones.
So, what name us a species that we might have heard of that's in that?
Dolibriformis.
Oh yes,
Peperomia dolibriformis.
Yep.
Now, this is one of the areas where there's a lot of hybrids around, and people might really not know what a good Dolibriformis looks like. And here I am. This is Dolibriformis var lombardii, which gives you the idea. It's got very, very thin leaves, and they've got a definite cleaver shape with only a tiny line on the top. That's called the window. That is
actually a window, as other succulent plants have.
If you imagine that the leaf is flat, and then to conserve water, the two sides fold up so that there's only a really thin strip of the top surface, the adaxial surface left, then that is what the fenestrate group, which is the window group of peperomias, what they have as a means of conserving water. So this one is a very, very rare one. It's the brown purple leafed form. I've got lots of the green leaf form. So then you get some of the really... another one that you might have seen around is asperula, which is green. Now, asperula means rough. And most of the ones around are not particularly rough. So they're possibly a hybrid.
Can have a little feel. Oh, yes,
if you want to see it, this is a more akin to the first description of an asperula, where it's purpley brown and the outsides of the leaves are rough. If you feel them.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, that is rougher, isn't it?
Yeah. This is a recent one that I've only had for a few months, which I was just so excited to get.
Oh, yes. That's kind of curious.
Peperomia hutchisonii. Very, very textured.
Sort of toad-like.
Yes, just like toads.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Tiny window along the top.
Yes. And these, if you can grow succulents, are these kind of a similar, other succulent plants like, say, crassulas or senecios, is it a similar care regime? They need lots of light and...
Yeah.
Mean on the water?
Yes, yeah. Virtually no watering over the winter, and I keep them on a south-facing windowsill.
And there's the Peperomia happy bean cultivar. Is that related at all to those? Because that seems to have a similar.
Also a fenestrate that is with the window.
Okay, because that's probably the one that we might recognise that you do is quite widely available. And again, I guess people are kind of surprised that there is this subsection of very succulent ones, but. It's worth knowing that, isn't it? Because that has such an effect. It's so disappointing if you overwater these and end up with a mush.
Yes. One of my favourites is Columella, which was available quite widely for a bit this year.
Yes.
And that is, again, you can see it's got its little window on it. But I think that people got it, sort of peperomia, thought high humidity, give it a bit of water. And I think a lot rotted away, which is sad.
Yes,
they're really a nice plant.
And of course, the caperata is an old favourite that's been around for forever. You know, I'm always going on about Dr. Hussain's houseplant expert, and obviously that features there.
Yes.
I mean, it's a plant that has kind of went out of popularity for a long time. I think it was seen as being a bit of a, I don't know, people went off it, but people are totally getting back into it now.
Yes.
Are you seeing lots of interest in, you've got this fasciated flower that you mentioned earlier, you're seeing new interesting cultivars coming through of that one?
Yes, there's some really lovely ones. There was a new one that was brought out this year called Keto with a lovely orangey red colouring. Yeah. So
and do any of these cope with deeper shade? Are there any peperomias that can cope with deep shade, or are they mostly, apart from these fenestrated ones, the old story of kind of bright indirect light? What's the light situation with most of them?
Yes, I would say obtusifolia is pretty tough, and so you could have that in quite a shady spot. So yeah, there are a few. A lot of them have a lot of peperomia. I've mentioned that they have different adaptations to different habitats, and one of the adaptations they have to low light conditions is a red colouring on the undersurface of the leaf, like this one, the Eden Rosso hybrid, which, if you have it in too strong light, that red colouring can fade. So that is something, if it's got a red underneath of its leaf, it will be able to cope with deeper shade levels. And it's thought that the anthocyanin in those cells, they're directly below the chlorophyll containing the photosynthetic cells, and it's thought that it's backscatter from light that helps it absorb light in low light conditions. So that's another indicator. That one any of those with that will probably be able to put up with low light conditions as well.
Well, I have to say, is that Incana there on the...
Yes, it is. Yes.
My Incana, which I've actually got from a lovely listener called June, I have it on it's really not getting much light at all, and it hasn't grown a lot, but it's absolutely fine. It seems to be, so that lots of them are very, very tough, and I guess that's why we love them, and they will adapt to different conditions, which is fantastic. And I just love the sheer variety of different kinds of leaves they have. I mean, looking at your wonderful Raindrop Peperomia, that leaf is a good, I don't know how wide that is. That's a good 12, 15 centimetres across, that leaf. It's just so lovely and dramatic.
Yes.
I can't.
And glossy.
How can you not love that leaf? It's beautiful. Yeah. So it's a wonderful genus, and I'm very excited to see your plants.
I know, you've now got even more plants on your wish list than you had before. Do go and check out the show notes at janeperrone.com for lots of information and tips on peperomias, and also details of Sally's national collection. If you were wondering about the propagation technique we were talking about in that interview, then that will be covered in part 2 next week, along with our trip into Sally's plant room. Yes, we haven't even got to her main collection yet, and we'll also be answering some of your peperomia questions. So do look out for that episode next Friday, and you'll just need to subscribe to On the Ledge on your pod app of choice to make that an automatic addition to your listening pleasure. That's what WRQ95 in Japan did, and they left a lovely review on Apple Podcasts for me, telling me that On the Ledge is the perfect plant podcast for the busy Tokyo commute to work. How exciting to think of people listening to On the Ledge in Japan. That's just awesome. And in another part of the world, Carolina got in touch to comment on the Oxalis Triangularis episode. Carolina is from Colombia in South America, with the Instagram account at soy.plantastica. That's soy.plantastica. And she reminded me something I forgot to mention in that Oxalis show, which is that, like the other members of this genus, it's a nitrogen-fixing plant. So it's used as a companion plant for urban agriculture. What's a nitrogen-fixing plant? Well, these plants have special nodules attached to the roots, which contain special bacteria that help to draw nitrogen out of the air and turn it into nitrogen that plants can actually use for growth. It's a pretty awesome adaptation that some plants have, and Oxalis is one of them. So That's something else to conjure with when you're looking at your beautiful purple false leaf shamrock. And Carolina also suggests using Oxalis triangularis as ground cover for taller houseplants, which is a brilliant idea. If you had a really tall strelitzia or a palm, this would look great around the bottom of the pot. And underplanting like that has lots of benefits for both plants, so do give that a try. And thank you, Carolina, for getting in touch. And thanks this week to Kat, Christopher and Frankie, who've all become patrons of On the Ledge this week. It's a great way to support the show, and if you pledge $5 a month or more, you get extra content too. Find out how to do that in the show notes at janeperrone.com. And now it's time for Question of the Week. Erin from Sydney, Australia got in touch with a question about her heart leaf fern some time ago. Thankfully, she sent me a reminder about this question, which is why I'm picking it up now. So apologies, Erin, it's taken a while to get back to you. She says that this fern has been going downhill fast, and she says that nobody seems to know the answer. So this all started at the beginning of winter in Sydney, where her house doesn't usually drop below about 15 centigrade overnight, she says, and the fern's in a brightly lit bathroom, and it's usually kept moist, even possibly a little bit wet, and she doesn't know what to do to revive her to make this fern beautiful and happy again. And Erin has sent a photograph, and compared to some of the photographs of ferns I get sent, I have to be honest, Erin, it doesn't look too bad. Yes, there is some browning to the edges of the leaves with some yellow bits, and I can see some leaves are looking a bit miserable, but I can also see that there are leaves in the centre that are nice and dark green and firm and don't seem to be too distressed. So what can you do with your heartleaf fern? So I think this is most likely Hemianitis arifolia, the heartleaf fern, which is a smallish fern with kind of leathery leaves. It's a very attractive plant, and it does love to stay moist at all times. So far so good. I think in the bathroom is a good setting for it, where humidity is quite high, and it sounds like Erin's giving it lots of moisture. I don't know how long you've had this plant, Erin, but the other obvious thing to do with any fern that's in a bit of distress like this is to pop it under some glass. This could be a big bell jar, it could be sticking it in some kind of terrarium or fish tank, anything that you can provide that provides a buffer between the outside world and the plant itself. That performs two functions. It locks in humidity in the air around the plant, and also it provides a buffer against changing temperatures. So given that you're talking about winter when this problem first started, it may be that the temperature's fluctuating day and night if you've turned the heating off, and the plant may not be too happy with that. Some plants like a change of temperature from day to night, but others like things to be kept more steady. And I think in the case of this fern, providing that buffer of the glass around the plant would probably help to just settle it down a bit. And because this is quite a diddy little fern, it's easy enough to find something to put it in. It's not like a huge Boston fern which you couldn't possibly contain under glass unless you've got a very large fish tank. So stick some glass over this and see what happens would be my advice. I'd also maybe try looking at the potting mix that it's in if you haven't repotted it since you've got it, and making sure it's quite an open, airy mix. Roots of ferns like to be well aerated, and there can be a problem that just gets completely solid and massed around the roots, and the roots can't breathe properly, which can manifest itself in unhappy leaves. So I'd take the plant out of its pot and investigate what's going on. If you don't want to put it under glass, the other thing you could do is the technique known as double potting. This is where you put your pot into a second larger pot, and you can put pebbles, or you could put moss, which you keep damp in the gap between the two pots, and this helps to increase humidity. You could also put water at the bottom of the outer pot if it's waterproof, and then put some wicks in the bottom and allow that water to be soaked up by the plant as it needs it, rather than just pouring water in which just sits there around the roots. If you put water into the outer pot, it won't be sitting in the roots, but it will be available for the plant to use. Misting, yes, misting is a good thing for ferns and won't do any harm. But yeah, the two techniques I've suggested are a lot less work once they're in place, and I just would forget to do the misting as often as I would need to do it. So check those techniques out and see if either of those work for you. But I reckon that your heartleaf fern has some good life left in it, so I really do hope it recovers. Erin, keep me posted and let me know how it goes. If you've got a question for On The Ledge, drop me a line on theledgepodcast@gmail.com and I will do my best to answer. As much detail as you can provide is always useful. Pictures and information about where you are and how long you've had your plant is often very handy when answering these questions. That's all for On The Ledge podcast this week. I'll be back next Friday with part 2 of Peperomias. Do check out my Instagram this week, j.l.perone, where I'll be showcasing some of the peperomias that I'm growing. For now, have a great week. Take care. Bye. The music you heard in this episode was Roll Jordan Roll by the Joy Drops, Rasham Pidity Bakara by Samuel Corwin, and Overthrown by Josh Woodward, with advertising music from the Heftone Banjo Orchestra with the tracks Whistling Rufus and Dill Pickles. All these tracks are licensed under Creative Commons. See my show notes at janeperrone.com for details.